Hey, welcome to the Dropship Podcast. And today I'm really grateful to have my personal coach on here, Elliot Rowe. Elliot is the leading expert in mindset optimization for high performers and the world's number one mindset coach for poker players. You work with tons of amazing business owners, UFC fighters, poker players, some of the best in the world. You're everywhere. I say it often. I don't know why you chose to work with me in that group of people, but I'm thankful you have. You have made one of the biggest impacts, if not the biggest impact in my life to this date, and I'm super grateful to have you on the show.
Ben, thank you so much, and also thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, and if you haven't heard, there's a longer version of this on my old show, the BK Show with Elliot. Definitely check that out. But we'll kind of burn through the same topics here today. You're a hypnotherapist, right? Yeah. Which we can get into what hypnotherapy is, but like, where did it all begin for you, Elliot?
So I had a fear of flying. I wouldn't fly long haul, so impacted my life quite considerably. Someone recommended going to a hypnotherapist for it, and I did quite skeptically go and see a hypnotherapist, and she managed to resolve it in an hour. It sort of blew my mind and changed my life dramatically in more ways than one. So I thought the change in my life was that I was happy flying, but really, the bigger change is that this ended up becoming my job. So effectively went into this session. She was bringing up memories from my past as to why I would find flying uncomfortable. Memory came up of seeing a picture of a small plane at my granddad's house and being told it had crashed and killed his business partner. What was interesting is it's a memory I didn't remember before I went into the session. And then afterwards, when I spoke to my parents, I found out it was real, it was true. And working through that memory and sort of having an idea as to why I felt flying was life and death resolved the fear of flying, and it opened up the world to me. So because of that, I went and trained as a hypnotherapist. And what I realized quite quickly is, yes, you can help people with fears, but you can also help people with performance, because performance issues are generally a fear. So fear of failure, fear of success, self-sabotage, those sorts of things. And obviously, if you can help people in sort of really clutch moments, very high pressure moments, that's really valuable. And for the last 12 years, I've been focusing on helping people understand why they're sabotaging themselves, why they're afraid of success or afraid of failure, and where they're getting in their own ways, and using these techniques to help them be more successful in life.
Let's dive right into the technique, because anytime I've mentioned this to someone, they're like, "Hypno, I couldn't be so strange, right?" And I try to explain it more like meditation. How do you tend to describe it to people who are new to the concept?
So the stuff you've seen in stage shows and TV, that's not really hypnotherapy. So that is a stage show. I'm not saying that everyone can't be hypnotized to get on stage and do a silly dance, things like that. But the sort of work I do is much more if you think of guided meditation. So if you've ever been able to meditate, you're capable of doing the sort of hypnotherapy work that I'm doing. The way to view it is with meditation. If you're doing mindfulness meditation, what you do is you relax your mind and body, and then as thoughts come in, you refocus your attention on your breath. And you do that over and over again, and that's the repetition of mindfulness meditation. With hypnotherapy, you get to that same relaxed state, but from that state, instead of thinking back to your breath, you're focusing all of your attention on a specific emotion. So in the examples I gave, that would be on that self-sabotage, that procrastination issue where you just can't bring yourself to do the thing you need to do, even though you know you need to do it. We'll focus all the attention on that emotion that's coming up. And by focusing on that emotion, we're able to connect back into the memories that created that trigger. Because for you to feel a certain way, or to be doing something irrational, your subconscious has a reason for making you do that. And in that state, we're able to trace back to where that's coming from, the logic your subconscious is using, and then work through reframing that so that that program can stop and you can be more effective moving forward.
What does that look like for your flight experience, right? Like when they brought you back to that emotion, how do you get there? How do you get to that memory?
So in that sort of instance, it was, so you get to this relaxed state and thinking about the fear I was feeling. I think we were even doing the fear. I would have the fear in the taxi on the way to the airport. So I basically think I was going to die when I was going to get on the plane. And so we'd focus in on that sensation I was having. It's like, right, when else have you felt this way? And it brought up some memories of being in turbulence in planes. And when else have you felt this way? And when else have you felt this way? And then it just memory of being at my granddad's house and seeing this small private plane and being told that story, etc., came up. And then the reframing that you do is taking it from a child's perspective, which is planes equal danger and death, to an adult's perspective of this was a random one-off occurrence in a small, flimsy plane. This doesn't mean you need to be scared of being on commercial aircraft. So showing love, calming the child down. By calming the child down in the memory, you're actually removing some of the feelings of fight or flight. So it goes from a scary memory into being a more comfortable memory. And then your mind doesn't quite know where to put it. So it takes it out of like, this is a trigger situation. So another example is school bullying comes up all the time with clients. So, right now, some of the listeners here, if they think about when they were bullied at school, or they think about their bully, they'll feel a bit sick, or they have some kind of physical sensation around it. And that's because as a child, that bully represented a fight or flight situation for you. There was an adrenaline dump. There was a fear of being harmed, of probably in the child's mind, potentially death, whatever it might be, the extremes children take it to. And then we hold on to those same feelings years later. But if we go back to those memories, it's one 7-year-old pushing or being mean to another 7-year-old. It's always stuff that you got through. It's always stuff that you survived. And by going over these memories, changing them, seeing them from the adult perspective and manipulating those memories, because memory's malleable, it's always different every time we go back to it anyway, we can just sort of push it a little bit further, change the emotion around it, and then that removes the triggers and the way those triggers fire in our everyday life.
I think that's the craziest part, that you're actually remembering the remembering. Like you're changing the memory every time you think about it. And so that just tells you right there that if you can go back and reframe it, you're going to remember it a different way, and it's going to have a little less power. A question I had right away, and when I mention this to people, it comes up too, right? So nearly everything that you've brought me to when we've worked together, and at this point I've had multiple employees work with your team as well, and they're all going back to childhood memories. Like, what can you try to explain the science of how 0 to 7 shapes like our operating system to this day, like that the things that we're struggling with in current life are somehow tied to a childhood memory?
Well, sort of in those early years, we're basically creating the program as to how to function and survive in the world. So evolutionarily, it was useful for children to be very absorbent in those years. So mum sees a tiger, screams, child learns that tigers are scary. So from an evolutionary point of view, it's a great survival technique if you can pick up fears very quickly. And, if you're living in a society, the way that you act, you learn through those years so that you're not, going to be in a situation where you're going to be cast out, because that would mean death for 10,000 years. It doesn't now, but it would have done. So we're set up to learn through those years the programs that will then serve us through our lives. Very useful in the jungle, not so useful in the modern world. So that's why we're usually looking for memories sub 10 when there's a strong anxiety response. So if there's a strong anger response, strong anxiety response, and it can be subtle things that happen. It doesn't have to be major traumas. It can be subtle things that happen through those years that taught you to view yourself in a certain way and live in a certain way. And then we can go back and overwrite those. The times that this is slightly different is when people have extreme traumas in their adult life. So a PTSD event, sexual assaults, a lot of military and police I've worked with over the years. So then you can pick up these traumas from something that happened in adult life. Typically, for it to be something in adult life, it has to be a much more traumatic event. So the subtle things can go back to childhood, and usually it's, am I lovable? Am I enough? Am I good enough? Do my family love me? Those sorts of things. They're common themes. But then with adults who've gone through very traumatic events, that can obviously create fears, create phobias, and difficult issues for people.
So you mentioned it with your plane memory that you actually don't remember that, and one that you and I worked on. I was struggling to ask for help. And we focused on that emotion, and it brought me back to, I'm so small, I'm tugging on my dad's pant leg. And he was pretty angry when he got home from work at 4 o'clock, or grumpy. And I don't even know what he did, just, I don't remember that. But it makes almost everything you brought me to, I don't really remember, but they make a lot of sense in the context of what we're working on. How do you explain that? That like you don't remember the plane incident, I don't remember most of mine. How does that work?
Well, I would say we don't remember almost everything from childhood. So it's not just these memories; it's just nearly all of it. I mean, I remember snippets of my childhood, but there's a lot of it that we don't remember. But it doesn't mean that it's not there and it's not stored away in a file of some kind. And sometimes we just tuck these memories away. So really, where I find it interesting in terms of how the memories are led back with the subconscious is really that statement I said earlier. For you to have an irrational response or a physical sensation around something that should be normal in your life. So getting on a plane should be, relatively, it's the safest thing in the whole world. That shouldn't be particularly scary. For me to have an irrational response, especially a very strong irrational response, there has to be a reason for it. Therefore, your subconscious knows the reason. Even if you consciously aren't aware, your subconscious knows where it's coming from. Otherwise, you wouldn't be feeling that way. And that's why it's such a sort of simple process of tracing it back, because if there was nothing there wouldn't be an emotion and there wouldn't be an irrational action. So the procrastinators say, like, in your industry, perhaps not getting your business started, not opening your website, not sending the emails, not whatever it might be, the irrational behavior where someone's holding themselves back, there's a reason why it's uncomfortable. It's, am I going to be judged? Am I good enough? Am I going to fail? If I don't give 100%, then I always have an excuse and I can say that I could have. Those sorts of things. And they lead back to things from childhood and programs that people have been running for a long time.
Yeah, for me, I've noticed it's when I know I should be doing something and I'm not actively doing it, that I need to call Elliot and say, hey, why am I not doing these things? And you find it. So I've heard you on a podcast before say that your fear of flying didn't go from, a 10 to a 0 in one session, right? It went from a 9.5 to a 4, I think is what you said on the podcast I listened to. And I could say the same, right? It's not like things are instantly removed. They just kind of fade away and they're less so. They're still there, but you're able to talk over the voice in your head that's telling you, the nonsense. So like, is there an average session? Like you and I have done over a dozen sessions at this point, and I'm thankful for it. But is it typically one session? Is it 5 sessions? Does it vary? Is there any commonalities there?
It really depends what people are working on. So an extreme anxiety, we would hope to make some change in one session. So again, like you accurately said, it doesn't go from a 10 to a 0, but it usually lowers to the extent the person can then start to practice the things. So let's say it was public speaking. Some people, when the thought of public speaking, they know they're going to be shaking on stage, their voice is going to be cracking, they're not capable of doing it. By working on that, we can usually bring it down to a level where they can then start to practice, and then the practice then makes them better. But they were at a stage previously where they couldn't even practice. In terms of numbers of sessions, lots of clients work with me for a very long time, but usually it's only if they're making more money because of the sessions, if fine-tuning even further has more value to them, then I cost. So if getting from a 5 to a 4 to a 3 to a 2 to a 1 is extremely valuable. So let's say in a trader on Wall Street, CEO of a multinational company, sometimes the things that we're doing are costing them tens of millions of dollars. And every percentage point down on that dial, they're making an awful lot more money. So they want to keep hitting those things. It's not getting it from very uncomfortable to okay. They want to be extremely good. And the fine tuning becomes more and more subtle as we go on. So in the first few sessions, we usually see the biggest shift, and then it becomes fine tuning for high performers who are just looking to be the absolute best in the world at what they're doing. And any tiny edge is very valuable to them. So it really depends on the client base. But if you're watching this and you're scared of public speaking, then probably think book in 5 sessions with a hypnotherapist. You should see a dramatic change, especially this is regression hypnotherapy. So I'm describing going back into the memories. Find someone who does regression hypnotherapy, not just suggestion, which is just the hypnotherapist telling you to not be scared and visualize not be scared. And we have a whole team of coaches at different price ranges who can help with those things.
Yeah, so we talked a lot of regression, right? The other side is suggestion. It's that forward-looking visualization. I love your app, Primed Mind. We'll put a link down below if you want to check out Elliott's app. What can you talk about the difference between regression and suggestion there?
So regression work, we're looking to basically stitch up. We're looking to heal the wound. So there's a wound there, and we're looking to understand where it came from and heal the wound so that the issue doesn't keep presenting itself. With suggestion work, it's like a really good Band-Aid, really good bandage. So if you were about to do, I keep going back to public speaking, I don't know why today, but if you were going to go do public speaking, a great thing to do would be before it, listen to one of these 15-minute hypnotherapy audios. So for that day, it's going to make you feel much better about public speaking, but it's not going to solve where the public speaking issues were coming from. It's going to overwrite it for the day. But we have these for sleep. We have them for confidence, for starting your day, for sales, sort of all sorts of different areas of life. And it gives you a boost. So it gives you a state change. So you're feeling in a down day, you're struggling with your afternoon at work. Listen to a 10 and 15-minute audio, and it's going to perk you up for that day. It's going to allow you to take control of your day. And that's what the app's designed for. It's to prime your mind, so primed mind, for specific activities and really give you a way to enhance your day that might not have been possible without it. But it's not something where I would say, hey, this resolves the entire issue, which is what we're looking to do with the regression work when you're working with a one-to-one coach.
All right, I'm going to shift it a little bit and ask you one more question. You work with all sorts of top performers, right? UFC champions, Olympic gold medalists, high-level CEOs, just the top of the top, right? World Series of Poker champions. What do you see that they have as commonality? What do you see as high performers? They all do, 1, 2, and 3, whatever they are. Like, what are some things that they all do that we can, listening to this podcast, say, I'm going to start doing these easy wins?
The very easiest win of all of them is have a level of routines in your life. So sleep, health and fitness, those sorts of things, like doing the very basics changes your life. Like it's get the 7-8 hours of sleep every single day. Make sure that you're exercising 5 days a week. Like sounds simple, but all of the high performers I work with are doing these things and a lot of other people aren't. So, copy the people at the top. Mindset wise, something I've noticed between people who are literally the number one in the world and people who are maybe 10 in the world, 20 in the world in different activities, oftentimes the people who are number one in the world, when they look at what number 2 and number 3 are doing, they're interested in what they're doing and they're trying to learn what these people are doing. And the people who are like number 10, number 20 with their competition, they're critical of their competition. And that's something that I've just seen as an interesting theme. So if you think about other businesses in, anyone watching this, other businesses in your industry, if you're thinking, oh, they're terrible, they're rubbish, probably you don't have the right mindset. You should be thinking, what are the things they're doing that are better than what I'm doing? Because that's where the edge is. So the edge is, it's always about learning. What can you learn from somebody else? Even if they're not as good as you, there's probably something they're doing that you can learn from. And I've seen that in high numbers of high performers. People being able to take recovery days is actually a high performance mindset. So athletes who train every single day end up burning themselves out and not coming first. Same with business owners. If you absolutely obsess on your business with 0 days off, it's unlikely that you're going to succeed past a certain point because burnout will come and you'll have to take more time off because of it. And then networking, incredibly important in every single industry, and not burning bridges and being kind to people. There's a lot of very high performers who are they're actually nice guys. Like it's surprising, people are always like, oh yeah, nice guys come last. I haven't seen that to be true with really high performing individuals. I've seen that they're good to other people. They network really well. People want to do them favors and those favors end up paying off. So it's just something to be aware of, that the sort of very cutthroat mentality is great over a 3-month period, but you're probably going to be in your industry for 10, 20 years maybe if you want to reach the top of it. And if you've burnt every bridge to get short-term gains, it is going to catch up with you at some stage.
Those are all fantastic. There was a couple in there that really hit home, and it embodies all the people I've met in your events. You've invited me to 4 or 5 events at this point, going to another one this fall. That's who are in the room. Everyone that you described, everyone that's going to be in those rooms or that already was in those rooms. Those are the habits they have. That's the way they interact with other people. And that's the mindset they take to life. So that's amazing. Look, in one session early on in our journey, Elliot, you took me to what you called my control room.
Yeah.
And it was in a building overlooking Target Field. And when I went and toured where our event's going to be next month, it didn't really click. I felt something in that room, and I said, we're having it here. And I got home, and my wife said, isn't that where Elliot took you? And it didn't really click. And so I could not be more thrilled that a guy who doesn't go anywhere is going to come for one day to our event and speak on our stage. You are the whale of the event. I appreciate that very, very much. You've changed my life. What might you speak on at the event and help change, the 40, 50 entrepreneurs in the room's lives?
Well, the direction I wanted to head for this was talking about this self-sabotage. So many people, in the sort of starting their own businesses, for some people, it's going to be the first business that they've started. You create roadblocks and put things in their own way. They don't do the work they know they should be doing. They hold themselves back. They make excuses. They dig into perfectionism, those sorts of different attitudes where if it's not perfect, I can't release it, those sorts of things. So I wanted to dig into this idea of, well, actually, perhaps, you're doing this as a safety mechanism and really understanding where that's coming from, why it's there, and why you should be making steps to move through that, work through that, so that you don't hold yourself up. I would say with newer entrepreneurs, procrastination is often the biggest issue that I see. So self-sabotage and procrastination. So that's the direction I want to be digging into, because I think that's going to be most valuable for your audience.
Well, I'm excited to see you there. I think as we're recording this, we have 8 tickets left. So if you were still wanting to come to Dropship Breakthru Live, head to dropshipbreakthru.com/live. The first speaker of the day is going to be yours truly here, Elliot Rowe. And I believe he's bringing Valentina, one of the coaches on his roster as well. And so I'm super excited to see you again, buddy. I appreciate you coming on the podcast as well.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me on the show, and I can't wait to see you and live that hypno session that we had.
No doubt.
we got to make it real. So can't wait to see you. And as you said, I'll be bringing Valentina, one of my team, along, and I think it's going to be a wonderful event.